I haven't watched a lot of movies in my life, so this year I set the goal to watch more movies. And in January I did great, watching 18 movies in a single month. And in February I did fall short, watching only 16 movies. But to be fair, it's a shorter month. But just like January, I'm gonna rank every movie I saw in February out of 5 stars. And this month might have peaked even higher than the movies I saw in January, which is crazy to say. Unlike last video, I'm not gonna be ranking these in order. I'm gonna keep you on your feet. Some movies are gonna be great, and some are gonna be pretty mid. So with that said, let's get into the list. Our first movie to talk about is actually pretty similar to a movie that came out in 2025, that movie being Marty Supreme. So going into Uncut Gems, starring Adam Sandler, I had pretty high expectations. And well, the movie was good, I guess. The movie follows Howard Ratner, a New York City jeweler, and he's pretty fun to watch, mainly due to the fact that he's pretty charismatic and he gets himself into these stupid situations, but also the fact that he has a severe sports gambling addiction. And throughout the film, he's just digging himself into bigger and bigger holes as he tries to get through his problems and deal with all the issues around him. And all this just builds up the tension and the stress within this movie. Like, this movie keeps you captivated as you watch Ratner's weasel his way through these problems. And similarly to Marty Supreme, our main character is kind of insufferable. But unlike Marty, I don't find myself rooting for our main character here. He isn't driven by like passion. He kind of is just a prick who gets lucky and gets through all the problems just off pure chance. And I know this is the point of the character and it isn't inherently a bad thing, but it definitely does damage the viewing experience. But besides that main issue, it's overall still a great film. And overall, the sports betting aspect of this movie just makes it so much more entertaining, especially since we get actors like Kevin Garnett. And I can't lie, he low-key does a great job in this movie at acting. But the flaws are there, and overall, I didn't even like the ending that much, so I'm gonna give this 3.5 out of 5 stars. Alright, that was a pretty solid start to the list, but this next movie is a bit different. It is the third movie of a trilogy, and honestly, the first 2 movies I didn't think were that great, so I went into this film with pretty low expectations. But honestly, Sonic 3 was a banger movie. The movie follows our familiar hedgehog Sonic, but now with Tails and Knuckles tagging along with him. We're also introduced to Shadow in this movie, and though his story can be a little edgy and corny at times, I think it works perfectly within this world. All our main cast is amazing in this movie, and Jim Carrey continues to be goated throughout this trilogy, even playing 2 characters in this one movie, where he plays Eggman, and then also his grandpa. I couldn't tell you all about that one. The main reason why this movie is so great and so much better than the first 2 is that all these insufferable human characters are just gone. Like, sure, we still have the main 2 that are like Sonic's parents. I couldn't tell you their names, but honestly, they don't ruin the movie too much. The movie's just a fun ride. The fan service is there, the characters are amazing, and overall, it's just an enjoyable watch. I'm not gonna act like this is the most complex movie ever, but in a world with terrible video game adaptations, this is a pretty solid one. So with that said, I'm gonna give this 3.5 out of 5 stars. The same rating as Uncut Gems. I just gave Sonic 3 the same rating as Uncut Gems. I low-key think Sonic 3 is better than Uncut Gems. Alright, our next 2 movies come from the same series, that being Harry Potter. I've been reading along with the books for these movies and it's been taking longer than expected. Like, seriously, what 4th grader is reading a book with 1,000 pages in it? They have to be lying. But whatever, I guess. Let's talk about the second film in the series, Chamber of Secrets. I honestly didn't love the second book, so going into the second movie, my expectations weren't very high. And somehow, the movie was even worse than the book. This movie, unlike the first film, doesn't have to dump you with a bunch of exposition about the wizard world. And it gets you straight into the action with the mystery of the Chamber of Secrets. And though our main characters are still pretty young in this movie, it's not as charming as the first one, or really as intense as the later movies. Also, with the mystery of the Chamber of Secrets, so much is stripped away from the book in this movie, which is expected, but it does ruin the mystery aspect of the film. In no world is this a bad movie. It's still Harry Potter and it's a fun time, but compared to the other films and books, it's not that great. I'm gonna give it 2.5 out of 5 stars. Now, the third book and third movie are peak, that being Prisoner of Azkaban. This movie is so much fun, and we really get to see a lot of Hogwarts outside of the castle within this film. I love the fact that our characters are beginning to grow up, and we get to see them explore this wizard world so much more in this film. Also, the visuals in this movie are a big step up. The world outside of the castle is amazing, and the Dementors are genuinely a chilling visual. I would give Prisoner of Azkaban 4 stars. Not only the best book in the series so far, but also the best movie. Alright, our next film is the only one I actually got to see in theaters this month. That being Iron Lung by Markiplier. In a list where I'm talking about some of the most critically acclaimed and popular movies of all time, I'm reviewing a movie by a YouTuber who plays Five Nights at Freddy's. I think everyone loves Markiplier, so going into this movie, I was pretty hyped and excited to see what he put on the big screen. However, despite that, I told myself I was going to treat this movie like anyone else. No matter the budget or who made the movie, I was going to treat it as fairly as any other movie I would watch in theaters. And I will say you can definitely see Markiplier's passion with this film, whether through his acting or the interpretation of a video game that he put on the big screen. And yeah, Markiplier is genuinely a great actor, and he does a great job in this movie. And through the course of the movie, I was pretty captivated, and it's generally a thrilling watch, even though it's set all in one space. However, about halfway through the film, there is a pretty big shift in the film, in the overall style of it. And some aspects were pretty interesting, and some just kind of left me scratching my head and wondering, why is this happening, why do I care? And most of the questions within this film are kind of left unanswered, which is fine, but it does make some aspects very unsatisfying. Both Markiplier fans and movie fans have praised him for this film, and though I think it's a solid job and definitely a good job at his first ever movie, it didn't amaze me in any way. Overall, it's still an interesting enough film, and it kept me captivated for the most part, but there was definitely some major flaws. At the end of the day, I'm still glad Markiplier was able to make a successful movie that's doing better than a lot of these big blockbuster movies that really aren't all that great. But with all those flaws, I can't put this movie any higher than 2.5 out of 5 stars. Our next film is the only fully animated movie on this list, that being Studio Ghibli's Spirited Away. This film has been glazed for like over 2 decades now, and it deserves all that and even more. I've never seen a film with this kind of animation where it feels so alive, and it feels more alive than a lot of live action films do nowadays. Like, this is genuinely one of the most creative films of all time. The world, the characters, and overall how everything works. It makes no sense to you, and I can't believe how anyone thought of this stuff. And the film leaves all these questions about this world unanswered, which I think adds to the mystery and exploration of it even more. But despite it being a children's movie, there really is a lot of deep topics in this film, like maturing, bravery, and greed. If you haven't watched this movie yet, you need to go do it right now. This is my first ever Studio Ghibli movie too, so I'm very excited to see what's next. I'm gonna give it 4.5 out of 5 stars. But honestly, it's pretty close to 5. Alright, the next 2 movies are both by the same director, that being Quentin Tarantino. Now, I've seen a good amount of his films, and they've honestly all been peak, so I was very excited to see these next 2 movies. So first, I'm gonna talk about Django. This film takes place a few years before the Civil War, and has a star-studded cast. We got guys like Christian Waltz, DiCaprio, Jamie Foxx, and Samuel L. Jackson, who will all put up amazing performances in this movie. And in this movie, we follow Django, who is a slave that teams up with a bounty hunter. And after Django eventually gets his freedom, he goes on a journey to free his wife, who is still a slave. Just like any other Tarantino movie, this movie is not afraid of using violence, which leads to the movie not really shying away from showing the realities of slavery and what was taking place during these times. And overall, due to the acting and the story being told here, this is one of the most captivating movies I've ever seen. And it generally has one of the most satisfying endings of any movie I've ever seen. And the other Tarantino film I saw was Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which has Brad Pitt, Margot Robbie, and DiCaprio again, I guess. In this film, we follow Rick Dalton, who's a washed-up actor, and also a stunt double, played by Brad Pitt. This film generally just has so much going on in it, I could never explain it all. It's Tarantino's attempt on looking back on the golden age of Hollywood, and it really just is a fun time. But the last 30 minutes of this film is completely different than the rest of the movie. It's just a crazy and weird shift, but it works so well. So overall, both these films were amazing. But Django was way better in my opinion. I low-key just found Django so much more captivating and interesting than Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So with that said, I'm gonna give Django a 4.5 out of 5 stars, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood 4 stars. They're both still peak movies, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is definitely growing on me. Alright, next up we have a niche film bro movie, or at least I think it is. Maybe I've just been living under a rock my whole life, I don't know. This movie being Children of Men. This is a sci-fi dystopian movie set in the future, taking place in 2027, which is 1 year away. We're all doomed. And though the world might be falling apart, in this movie it's a little bit different. It's been 17 years since someone has been born in this film, leading to society pretty much falling apart and the world pretty much ending. With society pretty much losing all hope, our main character Theo is tasked with a mission that could possibly save the world. This is really a dark film, and even some of the issues within this film can be seen within our current day society. But within all that darkness, there are themes of human persistence and hope within this movie. This film is shot really well, and the main lead's acting is genuinely amazing. And despite the film's short runtime, it really dives into a lot of ideas. But that also leads to a lot of this film's flaws, with ideas like environmental and immigration issues being mentioned, but never really explored within the movie. And sure, those aren't a core idea of the film, but I think there's still prevalent factors that could have been explored further with a longer runtime. But this movie does tell an incredible story, and I think with the rewatch, I could like it even more than I do right now. But still, I'm gonna give it 3.5 out of 5 stars. Alright, next up we have a World War II film. Now, most war films follow the same formula of a soldier being sent to battle for his country and being sent on a mission where he somehow manages to survive. However, this film follows a different perspective. We follow a Polish Jewish man whose city is occupied by Nazis and has to survive. Oh, and he plays the piano and he's pretty good at it. which ends up being pretty helpful for helping him survive. But this movie does not hold back on showing the violence and the true realities of what was taking place with the Nazis. And Adrien Brody, despite the little dialogue within this film, puts up one of the best acting performances I've ever seen. Okay, I know I've said that for like every movie now, but trust me, this is one of the best performances ever. One of my favorite war films ever. 4.5 out of 5 stars. Alright, I'm gonna rapid fire through these next two, as they're both rom-com movies. To be honest, I don't really care for rom-coms, so it's pretty surprising I watched 2 in 1 month. The first film is Eternity, which released just last year, which follows our main character after he dies, and he has to figure out where he's gonna spend the rest of eternity. However, after his wife dies like a week later, he has to go about competing for his wife with her ex-husband who died like 30 years before him in a war. It sounds pretty stupid, but honestly it's a pretty fun watch, and the comedy's pretty good too. It's a little bit predictable, but that's pretty much expected with every rom-com. Pretty solid movie though. I'd give it 3 stars. And the other rom-com is Crazy Stupid Love, starring Ryan Gosling and Steve Carell. Okay, so just a little bit of context. I did watch this movie by myself on Valentine's Day. I feel like that might be important to know. But honestly, this film was a pretty fun watch like most rom-coms. It was nothing crazy, but Steve Carell is pretty funny in this movie as we watch him combat his recent divorce. And even a pretty unexpected and fun twist at the end of the movie. But I'll be honest, there's no way I'm ever watching the movie ever again in my life. It was just a basic rom-com. But it's not a bad film in any way, so I'll give it 2.5 out of 5 stars. Alright, after those rom-coms, we've got a pretty big shift here, with our next movie being American Gangster. We follow Frank Lucas, a Harlem drug dealer, who is pretty good at what he does. He just kind of like surpasses the mafia and kind of does whatever he wants, and he's like tough as hell, and he's low-key sick. But on the other end of the spectrum, we have Richie Roberts, an honest cop who has dedicated himself to find this drug boss, as he combats all the corruption within the city. The Harlem atmosphere is amazing in this movie, along with the acting being great, and the ending is so untraditional compared to other crime movies. My only complaint is the movie is a little bit sluggish at times, especially with the 3-hour runtime. It feels like it slows down on some aspects and drags on in some areas. But despite all that, the movie is still great, and Denzel continues to surprise me with these movies. So I'm gonna give this movie 4 stars. Alright, the next 3 movies all come from the same trilogy, and they're all peak. With the third film being my favorite of the month, and probably one of my favorite movies of all time. So with all that said, you probably know what trilogy I'm talking about. It's the Ant-Man trilogy. Okay, I'm just kidding, it's Lord of the Rings. I still can't believe it took me this long to watch these movies after all the hype, especially being such a big fantasy fan. I mean, these movies have been glazed for years, and I can see why. This is the greatest trilogy of all time, and it's not close. Each movie flows into the next so well, and it all culminates into the final journey of destroying the ring. The movies are iconic, and for good reason. The characters, the world, and the soundtrack are all amazing. And though I said the third is my favorite, the first 2 are also incredible. With the first film providing exposition of the world we're in and the journey that we're about to be set on. And the second film just continues with that, with our heroes split up, facing more threats, and all culminating in a huge final battle. And then the third film brings it all together on the final journey of destroying the ring. I'd give the first 2 films 4.5 out of 5 stars, but the third film is a 5-star movie. It's perfect. And that's it, all 16 movies I watched in February ranked. So let's do some quick rewards for the movies I watched this month. Now the best movie was Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, and the worst one was probably Crazy Stupid Love, which honestly isn't too bad for being the worst movie on this list. For best lead actor, I'm gonna say The Pianist, but Children of Men is a pretty close second, and honestly, a bunch of crazy acting performances from all these movies. And most surprising or underrated was probably the Sonic 3 movie. I went in with really low expectations, and this movie was such a fun watch. It's probably one of the ones I'd be most likely to rewatch. But anyway, that's it for this video. There's a bunch of good movies dropping in March in theaters, so I'm really excited to watch those. So if you want to see me rank every movie I watch in March and in the later months, please like and subscribe. Anyways, it's time to go into hiding because all the Markiplier fans are going to be pissed I put Sonic 3 over their favorite YouTuber's movie.